welcome to the deep dive. All right, let's jump right into a stack of sources we've got here, all pointing towards one incredible foundational text, Chapter 9 of the Bhagavad Gita. What are we looking at today?
Well, we've got snippets from a deep spiritual discourse by Swami Chinmayananda, some really insightful blog posts from the Radha Krishna Temple of Dallas and Gita Journey that offer, modern takes. We also have a completely unvarnished look into a live online discussion, a Reddit thread where people are really wrestling with a specific, sometimes challenging verse, and even an academic paper connecting this ancient philosophy to how we think about work today. It's quite a mix. Our mission, simple, really. We're going to use these sources as our guides to uncover the key concepts within Chapter 9, often called the King of Sciences. See what kind of timeless wisdom pops out, and figure out why it might still matter to you right now.
It's quite a spread of perspectives, isn't it? You get the traditional commentary, modern interpretation, raw questions, and academic framing. It really highlights the many layers of this text. Okay, let's unpack this. One thing that really struck me from the sources right away was the idea that the historical context where the Gita was first taught. Well, it sounds almost eerily familiar to today.
Absolutely. The sources describe that time as facing a greater population upsurge, a rise of pure materialism. It was a period where power, respect for dollars or money on power position status was becoming more important than, moral values and ethical principles, culture, civilization.
Yeah, it sounds like any headlines you've read lately.
Exactly.
It paints this picture of traditional values kind of eroding, people scrambling for wealth and status, pushing aside deeper cultural and ethical considerations.
And that's why the sources are quick to call the truths in the Gita eternal truths. They aren't fleeting, They're compared to scientific laws like gravity. They're fundamental, always true. You can't really deny or contradict them based on changing times.
But here's the kicker, right? These aren't just nice ideas to ponder. The sources are pretty insistent that unless these philosophical values are actually implemented in our everyday life, they have absolutely no utility value.
Precisely. They remain just great thoughts. And what happens if they stay just thoughts? Life continues in endless competitiveness, mutual slaughter, mutual immorality, and wrong, false values. The sources make a strong point. You only transform philosophy into culture when you live it. It has to be practiced.
So if that's the historical stage, let's zoom in on something else these sources keep asking us to consider. This fundamental, almost mysterious question about existence itself. What is this mysterious power called life?
Yeah, the sources invite you to observe. It's like, you are alive, I am alive, he is alive, she is alive, the plant, the animal alive, the entire universe, everything in it is full of activity because of this driving force.
And they make this really interesting contrast. We know our bodies are just matter, calcium, carbon, all the elements, but we are matter plus. That plus is the ability to talk, listen, think, feel, act. It's something more.
And the point they underscore is powerful. Remove this mysterious thing, and you're left with so many pounds of man destined to become, food for worms or manure for plants. Grim, but
true, from a purely material perspective.
Right. But this flame of life, the sources say it seems one and the same in all of us. It functions equally in a tiny organism or the most brilliant human, seemingly unaffected by religion, race, gender, or status. It's universal.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? What do the sources tell us about the importance they place on this life force? Is it just background noise?
Oh, not at all. They suggest it's much more important to us than anything else in the world because they say, you may have everything, but if you have not got that, stop you. It's the prerequisite for everything else. No life, no experience.
That leads us directly into the core narrative of the Gita. Arjuna, the warrior, standing on the battlefield, completely paralyzed. The sources describe him as nervous, confused, dejected, despondent. He's facing his own family, his teachers, his kin, and his attachment to them throws him into this profound moral crisis. Is fighting even the right thing to do? He's just stuck.
And this is framed not just as Arjuna's personal problem, but as a universal human experience, really. This moment of confusion and desperation comes to every intelligent man who is anxious to live rightly when they encounter these moral, marginal situations. Animals act on pure impulse, right? But an intelligent human grapples with duty, right versus wrong, and consequences. It's the price of consciousness, maybe.
And Arjuna's initial plan, according to the sources, to peace out, be a dropout. He asks Krishna effectively, can't I just go to the Himalayas, sit and meditate and avoid all this? He wants to run away from the war.
But Krishna's response, as presented in the sources, is firm. It's basically, by running away from the world, you cannot run into spirituality. They explicitly state, Runways are covers of no place in this path. You can't escape into spirituality by escaping life. The path, Krishna suggests, is for real courageous heroes alone. Arjuna needs logical guidance, not an escape route, because action in the world is not just unavoidable, it's necessary.
This connects to the state of mind the sources discuss, right? Arjuna's mind is agitated, impure, turned outward towards objects of desire and attachment. That kind of mind, constantly in flux, isn't available for higher contemplative goals. It's too busy chasing things.
Exactly. The sources contrast this with a pure mind, which is calm, alert, vigilant, and capable of being turned upon itself for a higher contemplative goal. They highlight that purification of the mind is a crucial step before meaningful contemplation is possible. You need a certain stillness first.
This brings us beautifully to Chapter 9 itself, known in these sources as Rajavidya Yoga.
Yes, Yog through the King of Sciences.
King of Sciences. That's a bold title.
Yeah.
Why did the sources give it that name? What makes it the king?
Well, because it delves into the very highest philosophical truths, the nature of reality, the divine. But the purpose isn't just abstract knowledge, that's the key. The sources stress that discussing these points is meant to help the listener, or Arjuna, turn his mental attention in that direction. And the fascinating claim is that by simply turning the mind towards these truths, the mind gains an immediate experience of that higher state. It's about taking these idealisms and making them rendered practical, to give life a new glow. It's meant to be transformative, not just theoretical.
So it's delivering this incredibly profound, practical philosophy to an average, ordinary, intelligent skeptic, Arjuna, who's completely broken down in a crisis. It's wisdom for the person grappling with real life, not just scholars in a library.
Precisely. It meets him where he is.
Okay, let's dive into a specific verse from Chapter 9 that really caught the attention of our sources, especially in that vibrant Reddit discussion, as verse 9.32. This one raises some questions, potentially challenging ones, about who can reach the supreme destination. The translation provided says, "O son of Pratha, those who take shelter in me, though they be of lower birth, women, Vaishyas, merchants, as well as Sudras workers, can approach the supreme destination." Now, if you read that, like the folks on Reddit, you might immediately hit pause. What exactly does lower birth, or the Sanskrit term papayonaya, mean here? And why specifically list women, Vaishyas, and Shudras? Does that list imply they are somehow inherently less capable, or is it making comparison to sinners? It's understandably confusing.
It's a verse that has generated significant discussion across centuries, and our sources definitely reflect that. So we're just presenting the different interpretations found within them as impartially as possible, okay? So one view suggests that papayonaya actually means sinners, or those born into circumstances considered unfavorable due to past actions, and that this is a category distinct from women, Vaishyas, and Shudras. In this reading, the mention of these social groups, women, merchants, workers, is to highlight that birth or social station does not prevent spiritual realization. It's specifically including groups sometimes marginalized by society at that time, saying the path is open.
So it's about inclusion, in that view.
Yes. Then there's another prominent interpretation, which the sources note is aligned with Swami Chinmayananda's commentary. This view proposes that the terms don't refer to physical birth, sex, or social class at all, but to interpersonality traits, or svabhava, one's inherent nature. So svabhavastritvam isn't about being biologically female, but perhaps about being prone to overly emotional attachment. Swabhava vashatvam might mean being excessively preoccupied with commercial or money-minded concerns, that kind of thing. And gunashudratvam could indicate traits like indolence or laziness. Under this interpretation, anyone, regardless of their birth, can have these internal tendencies, and taking shelter in the divine is the means to transform them.
Wow, that's a really different way of looking at it, focusing on inner qualities, not outer labels.
It is. Some sources also root the verse deeply in the societal context of the Mahabharata era. They suggest Krishna might be highlighting the injustice of a sinful society that did discriminate against these groups, and he is declaring that spiritual equality is found in surrendering to the divine, irrespective of unfair societal status. It's like a critique of the times.
And I remember one source mentioning that the Mahabharata itself, which contains the Gita, was sometimes called a Veda for women and Shudras. What's the significance of that?
Yes, that point comes up. It suggests the broader message of the epic was deliberately intended for a wide audience, specifically including those who might have been traditionally excluded from studying the Vedas or participating in certain rituals. It points towards an intention of wider accessibility. And finally, some sources emphasize that this verse primarily demonstrates the radical egalitarian nature of bhakti, the path of devotion. For those like women and Shudras who might have faced barriers in traditional ritualistic paths, the path of devotion of taking shelter is presented as a direct and accessible route to liberation for everyone, no exceptions based on birth or role.
Okay, that's a lot of layers. And what about the very next verse, 9.33, where Krishna talks about Brahmins and sages reaching him easily? How do the sources reconcile that with the message of 9.32? Doesn't that sound contradictory?
Well, the reasoning presented in the sources is that Brahmins and Kshatriyas, the priestly intellectual and warrior ruling classes, were, due to past karma, virtues, or their societal roles and training, already considered closer to or more naturally inclined towards the spiritual path or certain religious practices. It was sort of their job description, in a way. So Krishna emphasizing the path for those not typically seen as being on that path, like women, Vaishyas, and Shudras, in 9.32, actually reinforces the point. He's saying, look, even those you might think are further away or who society marginalizes, they too can reach the supreme destination by taking refuge in me. It makes the accessibility universal. Underscoring it for those who might doubt it applies to them.
So it's less about saying Brahmins are better and more about saying the door is wide open for everyone else too, even if their starting point looks different.
That's the gist of the explanation found in several sources, yes. It reinforces the accessibility for all who sincerely seek refuge.
So across these varying interpretations found in our sources, the common thread seems to be this profound message of spiritual accessibility, even if the precise meaning of the categories listed remains, a point of ongoing discussion and interpretation.
Precisely. It reflects an ongoing dialogue about the verse's meaning within its historical and philosophical landscape. The core message of openness often shines through, however you parse the specifics.
Let's shift gears now from philosophy and verse interpretation to something incredibly practical explored in our sources. Karma yoga. This is the yoga of action, right?
Yes, it's described simply as the way of union through action. And the fundamental principle, which the sources really highlight, is that action is absolutely unavoidable in life. You can't not act. So the key isn't stopping action, but figuring out the wise way of doing it.
And what's that wise way? What does it look like?
At its core, it's working without expecting anything in return, specifically giving up the perks of the work itself. This is the heart of nishkama karma, desireless action.
Okay, so it's not about renouncing work or activities entirely, which sounds impossible for most of us.
No, exact.
It's about renunciation in action. It's about letting go of that feeling of being the sole doer, the kartapan, or sense of agency, and detaching from the anasakti, the attachment, to the results or fruits of the action, all while still performing the duty diligently. That sounds incredibly counterintuitive in a results-driven world.
It absolutely does, and it's a deep practice. The sources also bring in the concept of swadharma, which is often translated as one's own duty or innate nature. This is based on your original nature mixed with the skills needed for the work. It's about finding the action that aligns with who you fundamentally are. And it's interesting because the sources note that swadharma can sometimes involve actions that seem contradictory depending on your nature and the situation. For instance, a person who is naturally passive might need to engage in activity as their swadharma in a particular context, or a skilled person might need to oppose violence if that's what their role demands. It's very contextual.
And the gunas tamas, rajas, and sattva, these basic qualities of nature, they play into this. How?
Yes. Karma yoga isn't passive resignation. It's an active practice of working to reduce inertia and passivity. That's tamas. And also reducing excessive, restless activity and desire-driven action. Rajas. The goal is to increase balance, harmony, clarity, and peace. Sattva. Because that sattvic state helps you perform actions with that crucial detachment from the outcome.
This idea of doing work, but with detachment, seems to lead to the concept mentioned in the sources, excellence at work, or yoga karmasu kashalam from Gita 2.50. What does that mean practically?
Right. It translates roughly to skill in action is yoga. The sources describe this not just as being technically good at your job, but striving for perfection in the doing itself. It's about working wholeheartedly without being a workaholic. You give your absolute best. It involves maintaining a detached attitude even while putting in maximum effort. To achieve this, they say you need a clear vision or objective, deep concentration on the task at hand, and maintaining composure, that equanimity, even when facing challenges or setbacks.
Okay, so tying it all together then, Karma Yoga is presented as this path to purify the mind through selfless duty. It's like transforming work itself into a form of meditation. It's about serving others, even with passionate love, but doing it without craving personal gains or needing those external incentives like money or bonuses as the primary driver, though they might come.
Exactly. It's about becoming a tool for supreme or for a higher purpose, shifting the focus from just the outcomes, the success or failure, the reward or lack thereof, to the sacredness and dedication in the process itself.
Wow. So look at everything we've covered from these sources, the timeless context of the Gita echoing today, the fundamental philosophical question about the nature of life, Arjuna's intensely relatable dilemma. Then the core ideas of Chapter 9 as the king of sciences, the multiple layers of interpretation surrounding that complex, verse 9.32, and now this profound practical path of karma yoga, of skillful detached action. It's a lot to take in.
And you can really see how they weave together, can't you? The understanding of that fundamental life force, that plus in matter plus, is the bedrock. Facing life's inevitable challenges, like Arjuna's crisis, requires applying these truths through action, not running away. Chapter 9 offers a direct route, Raja Vidya Yoga, to connect with that higher truth, often emphasizing devotion and surrender, as in that phrase, those who take shelter in me. And Karma Yoga is the how. It provides the practical method for performing the necessary actions in the world in a way that doesn't create more problems or entanglement, but instead leads towards freedom and liberation from that cycle of cause and effect driven by desire for results. Remember Gita 8.7 from the sources. Therefore, at all times think upon me and fight with mind and reason set on me. Without doubt, thou shalt come unto me. It directly links the action fight with the awareness think upon me and the ultimate goal come unto me.
It's truly amazing the depth and breadth found just in these few sources focusing on one chapter. From the philosophical definition of existence to the nitty-gritty ethics of daily work, and even sparking these ongoing debates about equality and access to the spiritual path, the Gita keeps offering layers, doesn't it?
It really does. And the principles of Karma Yoga in particular offer such a compelling framework for navigating our busy, often stressful, action-filled lives today. The idea that detached, skillful action, guided by a sense of duty and a higher purpose, isn't just a chore, but could actually be a potential path to inner peace and clarity. Well, that's a powerful thought.
Absolutely. It leaves you with a lot to ponder, definitely.
And maybe here's something to mull over from the sources. If our usual cycle of bondage, or suffering, is often fueled by our senses constantly chasing pleasure and frantically avoiding pain, and if Karma Yoga offers a way towards equanimity, towards a certain indifference to those very rewards and consequences we usually crave or fear, what does that suggest about where true happiness and real freedom might actually be found in the midst of our actions?